Hey guys, it's Swanima here with more Chaos Head NoAH. Before I get started, I should mention I'm kind of on a time crunch here because, like, soon I'm going to Japan on, like, the 16th. So, I need to, and I'm gonna be gone for, like, 10 days. So, I want to try and get this game done before then. Yeah, from here on, it's probably going to be significantly longer episodes. Yeah, I apologize if that's not everybody's cup of tea, but this is pretty much for my own benefit, because, you know, I want to have this done before I go over there, so that I can, you know, not have to go 10 days wondering, oh, what am I gonna learn when I get back? I need to know. Yeah. I just want to be able to finish the game and then move on from there. So, yep. Today's gonna be a hefty episode, so, I hope you guys don't mind. But, anyways. Evil froggies, apparently. Just absolutely deplorable little creatures. Dubious little creature getting up to mischief. Oh, the beast is demonic in nature. Very icky. No good. Seems like they may be tied to the earthquakes and the G rate. But, yeah, it should be interesting to see what exactly their true nature is. And what the heck is going on. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and get right into it. So, the second I'd poked my head into school on Thursday, Miss Mikun immediately invited me to go see Ayase in the hospital with him. Given that the idea hadn't even crossed my mind, it caught me off guard. But before I had even been able to respond, Amy said she wanted to come too for whatever reason, and I ended up being swept along with her as a result. Is it just me or is this room a different color? Now, let me be clear. I had a heart and all. But considering the menace known as Shogun was drawing closer and closer to me, I didn't think this was exactly the time to show it. I didn't want to die. You've made that very clear, Takumi. Trust me, you have. Coming in through the front entrance, Miss Mikun looked around the lobby in confusion.
どうしたの？
いや、岸本の病室ってどこなんだろうなって思ってよ。
He kind of looks awkwardly shorter than her in comparison here due to how it's set up. Actually, now I think about it, this is like the first time they've actually, like, seemed to have hung out outside of school, this supposed friend trio. Assuming that one or both of you are not part of some conspiracy to mess with Takumi. Had he seriously come this far without knowing that? This guy was beyond belief sometimes.
ここは外来棟だよ。病棟は隣。
そうなのか。
大臣、しっかりしてよ。
It's Tokyo General Hospital. It was the hospital I'd gone to ever since I was a kid. I'd even come here just the other day, so I was pretty knowledgeable on where everything was. Dr. Takashina's face flashed across my mind, and I involuntarily groaned to myself. As we walked to the hospital ward, Nismi-kun turned to me.
で、病棟の何号室だと思う？
You know, I've always wondered, what the heck is he doing with his hand there? Like, he got it in some kind of claw shape or something? Like, just, his hand is very exaggerated.
そんなのわかんないよ。
This was a general hospital, so there were obviously a ton of different wards and departments. If I had to guess...
多分外科じゃないかな。でももしかすると精神科かも。
There hadn't been any visible injuries on ISA after she'd fallen. And considering she'd attempted suicide, her mind had likely been brought to the brink, so her being in the psychiatric ward seemed very possible. Even I'd been taken to the psych ward after the uproar at Ovrant.
タクって物知りだな。
常識でしょ常識ねタク。
I don't think it's necessarily common sense. I might not have known if I hadn't come here so many times in the past. Right as we were entering the hospital ward, Remy ground to a halt.
私お手洗い行ってくる。先に行ってて。
With a wave of her hand, Remy quickly headed back toward the outpatient ward. Thinking that wandering around the ward would cause problems for the patients, we decided to ask for help at the nurse's station. And just like I had predicted, they told us that she was on the floor for psychiatric patients. Delusion time. Okay, so positive, I believe. Yes, positive. Okay. The hospital room had an area of around 10 square meters. There was a toilet to the right of the entrance, and there was a bed near the back. The setting sun shone through the window on the other side of the room. Ayase wasn't in the bed. Based on how the sheets were a little messed up, it looked like she had been there until very recently. Her sword's still here. We're gonna see her on the roof again. Oh, this is definitely a delusion.
さあ。
ま、戻ってくるまで待つか。
The moment he said that, Misumi-kun started rummaging around the room for some reason. He didn't even have a shred of decency. Right now, it wouldn't be wrong to refer to this as Ayase's room. A number of her things were lying around, and mixed with the smell of antiseptic was that nice scent you could only find in a girl's room. Just kind of bursting into it while she wasn't there felt like we were peeping right into her private life, and I didn't feel very comfortable with that.
そういうの良くないよ。外で、待ってた方が。
ちょっと見るだけだって。お前も知りたいと思わねえのか？ S の私生活ってやつをよ。興味あるだろ？
Okay, sure. Ayase's personal life was a total mystery. Surely a quick glance wouldn't be so bad. Misumi-kun wasn't even showing an ounce of hesitation. Urged on by his bold attitude, my mind swiftly changed. I turned to look at the door to make sure no one was coming, then turned back toward the room. Feeling my heart thump hard in my chest, I started with the bed. I took hold of the slightly ruffled sheets, and then, having no idea what to expect, I gently turned them over. And what I saw was something beyond imagination. We absolutely need the CG. Very important that you see her lingerie. Yes, very important. absolutely important. You don't understand how important this is to the plot. You see the purple right there. The purple represents Takumi and the doubts that Ayase has about Takumi. The fact that she's left them here, taken them off, and is no longer in the room means that her talk with Suwa has caused her to release her doubts about Takumi. She no longer has doubts about him and can start to grow closer to him and understand him more. That now that she's let go of these dark misconceptions, as you can tell by the black lace on the lingerie. And, like, as you can see from how disheveled they are, it's very clearly an indication of just how warped her perception of Takumi was. As you can see, very, very deep. Very deep. This was very important for us to see here today. We're all in agreement, right? Right? Very important. Very, very important. The happy music playing right now is just because this is such a huge step for her. This is such a significant character moment. It's so beautiful. So beautiful. Hidden beneath the sheets is lingerie. A full set of lingerie. A pair of purple panties were scrunched up haphazardly. They'd very clearly been taken off recently. This wasn't brand new condition. This was wholly and entirely used. And this was a private room. And that one could only glean that Ayase was the one who could have worn these. The only one. So smexy. I hurriedly turned to check on Misumi-kun. Fortunately, he was too busy flipping through a magazine to have noticed my shocking discovery. I returned my glance to the underwear. I gulped. My throat was as dry as a desert. Man, talk to me, just do what I do. Have a half gallon of water a day. Just... Last checkup I had at the doctor, they told me I just have, like, absurdly healthy kidneys. My kidneys are just top tier. 120, just absolutely immaculate kidneys. I have the best kidneys, Takumi, so take it from me. Get your half gallon of water a day, and your throat will finally stop being as dry as the desert. My trembling fingers, almost entirely on their own, reached toward the underwear, feeling my pulse getting quicker and quicker. I ever so softly touched them. For some reason, they felt squishy, physical. Something wasn't quite right about this. Yes, you see, Takumi, she's actually the 8th new-gen victim, and her corpse has just been absolutely torn to shreds, and also made invisible. You just don't realize it. Her body's still there, man. Like, you're touching a corpse. This is absolutely horrible.
それは私のお稲荷さんだ。
It wasn't the fact he crashed, but how long it went on. Just like the implication that he was just absolutely decimating everything in the room. Just. Ugh.
見ろよタク、 変な本があるぞ。
I suddenly realized Misumi-kun was calling me. I was standing in the corner of the hospital room. The bed sheets weren't turned over, and there was obviously no sexy lingerie in sight. It's just been a delusion, huh? It ended with an extremely horrifying twist. So, that's what he meant. Oh, yes, it was. Man, me, you wear some really sexy underwear. Gotta see you on that sometime. It ended with an extremely horrifying twist, so I made sure that memory remained forever sealed. He had taken a magazine from high up on the shelf and was staring at it fixedly.
ヌーだぜ、ヌー。この雑誌、まだ続いてたんだな。
New was a magazine that focused on all facets of the occult. UFOs, aliens, ESP, religion, urban legends, mysterious phenomena, super ancient civilizations, OOP arts, etc. It wasn't difficult at all to believe that our very own schizo shit-loving ISA would be reading it.
こっちの文庫本は、何々グラジオール記黙示録詩編ファンタジー小説っぽいな。
I wasn't familiar with that specific book, but the term gladiole did ring a bell. Where had I heard it again? I was pretty sure it had been pretty recent.
岸本と付き合うとなると、この趣味に合わせないといけねえのか。大変そうだぜ、これは。
Clearly, you don't understand the widespread appeal of goth girls. Have you still not given up on dating, I say? Even after being turned down in an instant last time?
Huh?
Well, that took you long enough. Must have been in your dead spot. Suddenly, ISA's D-sword came into view in the corner of my eye. It was leaning against the window. It looked like a space battleship ripped right out of a sci-fi movie. My opinion on it hadn't really changed either. It was an awesome-looking sword, possessing equal parts beauty and cruelty. Even though it wasn't glowing, and even though it was just leaning against a window, it still had that typical impressive feeling of presence to it. Misumi-kun showed no sign of noticing the sword. So the eyes of normal people can see them after all. I wonder, if I were to take it without ISA knowing, would the sword become mine? If I could really obtain a D-sword with zero effort, then there was no time to waste here. The desire to do so bubbled up within me. With a gulp, I timidly, ever so timidly, reached out for the sword. I grasped the hilt, and then my hand burned off. Or well, I tried to grasp it, but my hand had gone right through it, leaving me grasping only thin air. I tried once more, but the result was no different. I couldn't grab it. I couldn't even touch it. Did that mean the sword wasn't real booted? As mutual recognition had been achieved, it was no more than ISA's delusion. An illusion, a dream, an afterimage.
何やってんだお前。
Misumi-kun looked at me in confusion. We then waited for around 10 minutes, but ISA still showed no signs of coming back. Same thing with Rimi. She was still in the bathroom, apparently. Where could she have actually gone? They're probably meeting up or something.
リミってこの病室の場所知ってたか？
あ、
We'd asked for the location at the nurse's station after Amy had left. She could very well be wandering all throughout the hospital as we spoke, not having any idea where we were, where this place was. Nah, I think she knows exactly where she is, given that she asked to come along, and then conveniently disappeared.
あいつバカだからな。俺たちみたいに誰かに聞こうって発想がないのかもしんねえぞ。
探しに。
I felt uneasy not being with Rimi. I couldn't say for sure that this hospital was safe. If Shogun were reading my mind right now, he would have known that I was here.
そうだな。待つのも
I
飽きた
mean,
し、
there's also a very
タク
good
もあい
chance
つが
that
い
he
ないと
is
寂しい
here.
だろうからな。
Especially given that Rimi was seen standing outside of the hospital that one time.
なあ、ぶっちゃけリミとはどうなんだ？
え？
付き合ってんのかって聞いてんだよ。お前ら最近結構いい感じじゃね？
付き合ってないよ。
Despite what I'd said, my face was still flushed. Me and Rimi, dating. It was true that I'd had delusions of that many times. I hadn't been interested in 3D in the past, but nowadays, Rimi was becoming more and more important to me with every passing day. But back when Rimi had said she'd stay by my side, she'd also said the following.
そんなの友達だからに決まってるでしょ。
In other words, she only saw me as her friend. There was no way in hell she'd want to start a romantic relationship with an otaku freak like me. Besides, Rimi would probably be a bit slow on the uptake with that kind of thing. I split ways with Misumi-kun and went to look for Rimi or Ayase. Misumi-kun had gone downstairs, so I decided to take my search above.
Amisha! Amisha!
I passed by an older patient in the corridor, probably around his 50s. He was staggering down the hall while calling out to someone named Ami-chan over and over. I ignored him and headed farther into the corridor. Nobody seemed to mind me wandering around the hospital, maybe since I'd used to come here pretty often. But for every corner I turned, and for every door I saw open, I felt my heart rate increase at the thought of Shogun appearing from them. And not only that, but the occasional crazed screams and cries coming from any number of directions weren't exactly good for my mental state. The corridor was uniformly dyed a cream color. Some of the rooms were open, some were closed. And to make sure that there were no signs of Shogun being around, I peeked into a whole bunch of them. Each room had 2 beds lined up next to each other, with person-shaped bulges lying underneath the sheets, likely sleeping patients. But their faces were always in a blind spot, so I couldn't see them. There weren't many people walking through the corridors. Just the man calling for Ami-chan and a single nurse. Those were the only 2 I'd passed by. I didn't really want to be here. I didn't know why, but that feeling refused to leave me. The atmosphere was heavy. It wasn't oppressive per se, but I had the nagging feeling that I shouldn't have been there. A little farther in front of me, the corner made a 90-degree turn to the right. Did the hospital rooms continue through there, I wondered? As I pondered that, I cautiously turned the corner. What the? And I was immediately met with a wall. It sat in the middle of my path, and in vast contrast to the entirely cream-colored hospital, it was covered in black paint from top to bottom. complete dead end. For some reason I didn't know. My pulse quickened. I couldn't move even a single step from where I stood. My vision wobbled and shook. Thinking it was vertigo, I tried to close my eyes and massage my eyelids with my fingertips, only to feel my eyeballs twitching beneath them. A chill as cold as ice crawled up from my feet. I stood dead in my tracks, forgetting how to even breathe, staring at the black in front of me. I felt as if it would suck me in, as if it would swallow me whole. A deep, never-ending darkness. Even though there shouldn't have been anyone there, it felt like someone, somewhere was watching me. God's gaze pierced into the nape of my neck. Its presence was on a completely different level compared to how it would be at my base. Don't look. Mustering all my mental strength, I managed to close my eyes. I finally was able to breathe again, and I stepped back while gasping for breath. With my head facing down toward the ground, I fled through the corridor. I sped back to the floor with Ayase's room, gasping and wheezing all the way. I touched the nape of my neck and felt sticky sweat oozing from it. But the sweat wasn't just coming from there. My entire body was drenched in it. What the hell was going on? Was Shogun reading my mind? The presence of God's gaze wouldn't go away. My wheezing and shivering refused to calm down. Exhaustion had devoured my motivation in an instant. I wanted to go home. I wanted to have Rimi take care of me as we locked ourselves in my base. It wasn't like me visiting Ayase would make her happy. If anything, it would probably do the complete opposite. I was an idiot for coming along with Misumi-kun. The guy clearly had an agenda, and it was at complete odds with me. I had no reason to be here. I should just go home before either Shogun or Yua appeared. They always appeared whenever I least expected it. I bet they'd pin down where I was with ease. No matter where I was, I needed to be prepared. Chasing the wall with my hand, I staggered my way to Ayase's hospital room. Had Misumi-kun gotten back yet? Hoping he'd found Rimi, I dragged my legs forward.
山井さんがまたアミーちゃんっていう名前を呼んでたんですよ。
I heard the voice of a nurse coming from ahead. Looking, I saw that two of them were walking in my direction. One was young, and the other was a well-built middle-aged lady.
一体誰のことを探してるのか。
それこの病院に伝わる怪談よ。誰も知らない幻の病室があって、そこにアミーちゃんが入院してるらしいわ。もう何年も前からある噂。
I looked back down and waited for the two to pass by. I held my breath, tying my ragged breathing. I could easily tell they were giving me suspicious looks, but they still ignored me all the same. After the two nurses passed me, I continued my endeavor and arrived at the nurse's station. I must have missed Ayase's room, as it should have been a bit before. Clicking my tongue, I wiped the sweat off my forehead. It still felt like I was being watched. The depths of my chest throbbed with pain. My ears were ringing too. I felt absolutely terrible. My body was a total wreck. I hadn't felt anything like this at all when I first got here. What the hell had happened to me and my body? With the pain overwhelming me and becoming too much to bear, I went to ask for help from the nurses at the nurses' station. Hello, Hotski. You're looking fish-eyed again. But there was only one nurse there. She didn't seem to have noticed me. Her back was turned to me, and she was mumbling something while deeply absorbed in whatever she was working on. In her hand was a clipboard. She was writing something on the form stuck to it.
信仰の救いあれ信仰の救いあれ信仰の救いあれ信仰の救いあれ信仰の救いあれ信仰の救いあれ信仰の救いあれ信仰の救いあれ信仰の救いあれ信仰の救いあれ信仰の救いあれ
I'd seen this person many times before. She was that one nurse, Husky-san. And we're seeing his face again. Oh, this was the NoAH Tokyo General Hospital psychiatry ward. Of course she'd be here. She'd already attended to me twice in the past month alone. Oh man, this was perfect. If I called out to her, she'd surely be able to help me with whatever An urgent sounding ringing noise suddenly rang throughout the room. Husky-san put down her clipboard in surprise, then operated a switch with her hand. The ringing sound was cut off. Looks like it snapped her out of that trance she seemed to be in. She'd probably been paged to do some nursing thing, as she rushed out of the nurse's station in a flurry. I think it's clear by now she's probably way more important than the game's been letting on. Question is, how important? Why hadn't she noticed me? Even though I was suffering from so much pain right behind her. I could barely stay standing. The vertigo was awful. With no other choice, I decided to go into the nurse's station to wait for someone to get back. I found a stool around where Husky-san had been standing, then sat down. My head ached. It felt like it had back when the earthquake hit a week ago. But this pain had a different nature to it. Or so it felt, anyway. I needed something to drink. Just trying to breathe hurt my throat, likely because of all the gasping and wheezing I've been doing. Thirstiest man alive. I casually looked around the area. My eyes then landed upon the clipboard Husky-san had been holding. And the very next moment, what was scrawled on it entered my field of vision. Oh boy. Whenever I'd gone in for a checkup, Husky-san had always been writing something on that clipboard of hers, all while having the same gentle smile on her face. I thought that she'd been writing down the prescriptions she'd planned on giving me, my temperature, things like that. That was why I was drawn there. It was beyond my comprehension. It's you with a bunch of crap stabbed into you. I had seen it before. I had already seen this shittily drawn sketch somewhere before. But where? Where had I seen it? Oh. My head ached. A stabbing pain pierced through it. The hairs on the nape of my neck stood on end. Don't look at me. I picked up the clipboard. Countless medical forms were clipped onto it. I went to flip up the page. The second piece of paper had the same shitty drawing. I flipped to the next page. The third was also the same. And the fourth, and the fifth, and the sixth. Each and every one of them had the same drawing scribbled on it, again and again and again. This drawing. Was the crucifixion. Looks like we got a prime suspect. I mean, not gonna lie, I was pretty sus of her anyways. I just didn't speak up for a while, but yeah. Well, I mean, that being said, I'm sure she's a red herring, but I'm guessing she's important somehow. Evening fell on the roof of an old building in Shinsen. The building atop which Nishijo Takami's container house stood still as death. It was Aoi Senna's second time visiting it. The first time had been a few days prior, following her encounter with CoZ and Takami and Center Guy. She'd gone on to tail the boy in secret. Through this, the location was set in stone in her mind.
セナさん、やめた方がいいと思うのだ。泥棒さんはね、コズピ嫌いなの。にゃん。
それならどうしてついてきた？
Senna regarded Kozue. Whoops. Senna regarded Kozue in a cold manner, refusing to even turn around to view her sagging shoulders, nor her long face. Senna had come here to infiltrate Takami's room. Nishijo Takami is not normal. That was the conclusion she had come to after speaking to him many times. There was no doubt in her mind that he was distinctly different to normal gigolomaniacs like CoZ and herself. Did he possess delusional abilities so abnormal it proved terrifying? Or could he perhaps be receiving some form of artificial support? Regardless of which it might be, the uncertain nature of Takami greatly bothered Senna. As of the current moment, she was searching for a man known as Hatano. There was a very real possibility that Nishijo Takami had some kind of connection to him. She had no conclusive evidence of this. I assume Hatano is the homeless guy. But through investigating even the most lightly suspicious things with her own eyes, the possibilities would be torn down one by one. And with such methodology, she would find her target with absolute certainty. That was Senna's creed. The door had a padlock attached to it. With a slight scoff, she swung down her D-sword that she had preemptively reel-booted. The padlock was effortlessly smashed to pieces.
たくみさんが帰ってきたら怒られちゃうよ。
Senna had already confirmed that Takami had been heading from school toward the station with two of his friends. However, even if he were to find out, it would make no difference to her. When it came to attaining her goal, Senna had no qualms with others coming to detest her, or even being reported to the police. She opened the door and stepped into the room. Senna could only grimace at the disastrous cesspool of a room. The endless piles of trash forced a groan from her mouth.
汚いね。
なんで楽しそうなんだ、コズ。
かな。
With a sigh, Senna ventured deeper into the room, shoes still adorning her feet.
お人形さんいっぱいなのら。うぷー。たくみさんって変態さんだったんだ。すごいな。
Why do you sound so delighted by that? Paying no heed to Kozue, who seemed oddly impressed, Senna stood before the PC. She turned the power on without hesitation and scoured the desk with her eyes as she waited. Furrowing her brow, she picked up a sheet of paper that had been left on the desk, an essay.
その目、誰の目だ。
Kozue had peeked at the essay from behind Senna's back, and she was now jumping up and down in excitement.
やっぱりたくみちゃんがその目誰の目の人だったのら。コズピーはパンパカパンタタポーン。
I'm guessing that that's not quite true. In masked contrast to Kozue, Senna skimmed the essay with disinterest, then casually flipped it over. The very next instant, her eyes widened in shock.
これ
Something was drawn here. It was...
うんぴー、人がいっぱいだね。これロボットさん ?IR2 だって。 セナさん
The sound of gritting teeth escaped from Senna's lips. Her expression was far more grim than usual, and the hand holding the essay trembled with anger. Is it Gladiole?
そうか西条が IR2 を生み出した張本人か
For IR2. Her voice forcefully stifled, and she crushed the sheet of paper in her fist. Stairs. I left the nurse's station and stumbled around the hospital, my mind buried in fog. I was doing everything in my power to avoid thinking about what I'd just seen. Before I knew it, I found myself standing at the landing of the staircase, with Misumi-kun gazing outside by the window.
どうしたタク？汗びっしょりじゃねえか。顔色も悪いし。あ、顔色悪いのはいつもか。もしかして走って探してたのか？そりゃバテもするぜ。無茶するね、お前って。
I wiped my sweat away and tried desperately to feign composure.
リミと岸本、見つけたぜ。
Despite what he'd said, I couldn't see either of them. Then, for some odd reason, he pointed outside the window.
あそこだ。
Once I caught my breath, I approached the window. I could see the outpatient ward from it. The outpatient and hospital wards were separate buildings, accessible through a corridor connecting them. They weren't all that far apart, though. The hospital ward had many floors, and the landing I was on looked slightly down on the roof of the outpatient ward. On that roof, shrubbery sporting red flowers formed a makeshift garden, and it seemed to be a place where patients went to relax. In the center of the garden, I could see Rimi and Ayase. Ayase was wearing pajamas, and she was discussing something with Rimi. Those two shouldn't know each other, right?
なんか妙にシリアスに見えねえか。
It almost looked like they were glaring at each other. Suddenly, Ayase closed in on Rimi and slapped her right across the cheek. Even from where I was standing, I could tell that she hadn't held back one bit. Ayase then walked away from Rimi. She was heading in the direction of the passageway, so she was probably going back to her hospital room.
今ビンタしたよな。
I nodded. Even after being left behind, Rimi didn't move an inch. She simply stood there.
あの二人ってトラブル抱えてんのか？
If there was, I knew nothing about it. I readily went along with Misumi-kun's proposal to pretend like we'd never seen what we'd seen. We then decided to leave Rimi to her own devices and return to Ayase's room. The state of my body had mostly recovered by now, and God's gaze had vanished. It was to the point where I felt like that horrible sickness I'd been feeling had never even been there in the first place. Misumi-kun let out a sound from in front of me. I looked up in response, only to see Ayase walking over to us. Her head hung slightly limp, and her gaze pointed downward. Her steps were slow and lacking in any energy. Her face was very pale, and her expression was, to no surprise, intensely somber. We had somehow managed to bump into Ayase right in front of her hospital room.
よ、岸本さん。
Misumi-kun gave the most eloquent greeting possible for him, to which Ayase raised her head in surprise. I was a new sprite. She looked at me, and then, despite seeming like she was on the brink of tears, she smiled at me. Why had she done that? Had she heard about the uproar that happened in front of O-Front? About all the shameful things I'd done? Or was she just being friendly? The former would be beyond depressing.
俺たち君のお見舞いに来たんだよね。つうか岸本さん、パジャマ姿も可愛いじゃん。
His passive pickup artist had activated in barely any time at all. Talk about rushing the objective. Took me a moment to realize that he meant a passive skill, like in JRPGs. Although Ayase had treated Misumi-kun pretty coldly before, she didn't do that this time. Instead, Ayase opened her door and invited us in. She didn't show a single hint of having slapped Rimi just a few minutes ago. Was she hiding it well? Or had she already gotten over it in such a short time? As per usual, I had no idea what Ayase was thinking.
やっぱ見舞いに来たのは正解だったぜ。今日は好感触だ。
Misumi-kun gave me a small fist bump while Ayase wasn't looking, and excitedly entered the room. I reluctantly followed after him. In all honesty, I wanted to head home with Rimi ASAP. But I didn't have the courage to say anything to her. Ugh. Ugh. The yawns come for me again. I didn't know the reason why, but being so fiercely slapped like that must have made her pretty depressed. And I knew I didn't have the words to encourage her. Ayase sat down on the bed, and Misumi-kun very casually sat beside her. Talk about daring. I couldn't help but be taken aback by Misumi-kun's mode of attack. Ayase gave Misumi-kun a single glance before fixing her gaze upon me. Being stared at so blatantly put me at a loss for how exactly I was supposed to respond. I didn't know what kind of expression to make, so I just ended up looking down at the floor.
怪我どう？もうだいぶ良くなってるみたいだけど。なんか必要なものあるなら遠慮なく言ってよ。俺がすぐ買ってきてやるぜ。
Milady. He focused intently on Ayase's hand. If I had to guess, he was scheming on how best to grab it. That refined, slender hand. Should I just go?
あ、小説とか読む？俺さ、グラジオール記黙示録詩編ってのが好きなんだけど、岸本さん知ってる？
匠。
Leaving Misumi-kun's question unanswered, Ayase called my name.
君はグラジオールの7騎士の一人よ。
あ？え？
Right into the schizo shit, huh? Even the mayhem surrounding her attempted suicide hadn't been enough to change her at her core.
やっぱり導きだったんだわ。君と私が出会ったのは。
Quietly, dispassionately, Ayase narrated about what I could only call a totally chuny storyline.
君の邪神はとても強大。だからこそ言うことなしなのよ。黒騎士としての素質は。君が今経験している苦しみはすべて神罰。大いなる意志による試練なの。それを乗り越えた時に理想度は召喚されるわ。君の手に必ず。そして現れるのよ。
Then why'd Shogun try to rush it?
邪神の黒き大蛇。あらゆる崩壊を飲み込み、邪神王の身を砕くことのできる。同質にして異質なるものが。現実なの。グラジオール、理想度も、かまいたちがその証よ。実在しない現象は後世に言葉として残ることはないわ。知っている？語源を。かまえたち。それは理想度を意味しているの。信じて、匠。グラジオールを倒すのよ。一緒に。
Delude. Neither. So no delusion. Gladio. I remembered that name. I'd seen that term back when I'd first been researching D-swords. It seemed like D-sword was a term used in literature and pseudepigraphia. Pseudepigrapha relating to the legend of Gladio, or more specifically, a sword in it. I wasn't really sure though. As I continued to think, Misumi-kun quietly got up and started to walk toward me. He went to go right past me, but just before he did, he put his hand on my shoulder.
俺もうついていけねえや。あとは任せた。
With a sigh of exasperation, he left the hospital room. Leaving me alone like this wasn't fair. Ayase hadn't even shown a hint of interest in Misumi-kun leaving. It was almost like she was pretending he had never even been there in the first place. She was always like this. Always so detached from everything. It felt like I was looking at someone fundamentally different from normal people.
君が生み出したんでしょ。あの時の花壇。 それで悟ったの。君はすでに目覚めていると。
僕はギガロマニアックスじゃないよ。
ギガロ？何？
ギガロマニアックスでしょ。青いセナから聞いた。
青いセナ。そう、彼女ね。一度だけ会ったことがあるわ。グラジオールの黒騎士よ、彼女。
Black Knights of Gladiol and Gigalomaniacs. Did they mean the same thing?
とにかく僕は違うんだ。ディソードだって結局手に入れられなかった。
神罰を乗り越えて、そうすれば剣は召喚される。
神罰？
苦しみ、心的負荷の爆発、心の扉の向こう側、あるいは精神的拷問。
I'm wondering if perhaps the reason Shogun took Nanami hostage and made Takumi think something so horrible happened to her is because he was trying to break him. He was trying to break him because once you break, you can obtain a D sword.
言い方はいろいろ。
僕これまでにもたくさん苦しんできたよ。
Even now, I was still suffering. I was the laughingstock of Japan. The police thought I was a murderer. Shogun and Yuo were terrorizing me left and right. And everything with Nanami.
私は精神病院にいたわ。子供の頃の話。
うん。
I already knew. I'd seen it online. But why was she suddenly bringing it up?
そこには5年弱いた。私の心はとても弱くて、だから攻撃した。周囲にあるものすべてを、同時に自分のことも。
Ayase's voice was a faint murmur. The girl that sat in front of me wearing pastel pajamas, chasing the creases on the sheets with her fingertip, showed no signs of the strength she'd once had at the concert. The Ayase, the Fess from back then, had she even been real?
私はよく窓ガラスを割っていたの。問題児ね。
A faint smile formed on her lips.
割れたガラスの破片、そこにいつもぼんやりと見えていた。
何が？
剣が。でも何年もそれが何なのかわからなかった。ようやくそれがディソードだと知ったのは施設に入って4年ほど経った頃。それまで私は好き放題やっていたけど、ある日施設の職員が一斉に入れ替わって、私は何ヶ月もいろいろな拷問をされて、心が壊れてしまう間際に大いなる意志の声が聞こえて、やっと召喚できたのよ。
拷問って？
それが神罰だった。邪神を打ち破る力を手に入れるには純粋なる邪神が必要。
So basically, she was telling me I needed to suffer more. Otherwise, I would never get a sword. If that was the case, then fuck that. I didn't want to experience any more pain. I'd already been broken down over and over again. I just wanted to be left alone. At my wit's end, I felt the urge to scream and shout. But Ayase's voice didn't allow me to.
すべてはお告げよ。すでに渋谷に集っているはずなの。7人の口説き師は。あとは全員が覚醒するだけ。
So, we've got Takumi, Senna, CoZ, Ayase. So we're missing 3. If we assume for a moment that the other prominent girls are knights, then that would be Yua, Nanami, Rimi, I assume. So, yeah, that would be 7.
急がないと世界は滅びるわ。グラジオールの手によって。
With both our shoulders drooping toward the ground, Misumi-kun and I descended to the first floor of the hospital ward.
俺もう岸本のことはどうでもよくなった。これまでの俺のポリシーはな、タク。可愛ければ何でも許してやるだった。けどそりゃ間違ってたよ。あんな強烈なテンパ、俺には受け止めらんねえよ。素直に梢ちゃんだけ狙うことにするぜ。
Not exactly sure if that made things any better. I mean, Misumi-kun had an actual girlfriend he was dating.
お前マジですごいな。岸本のあの脳みそお花畑の話、よく30分近くも聞いてられるよ。俺尊敬したぜ。俺は3分も持たなかった。この俺がだぞ。
Don't ask me. Barely listening to Misumi-kun, I focused on my surroundings as we walked. And then, I found a dazed girl standing in front of the outpatient lobby, Rimi. From a side view, I couldn't even see a trace of her usual energy. She seemed deep in thought as she gazed up at the lingering sunset, her hair fluttering in the chilly breeze.
おーい、リミ
Rimi quickly turned after Misumi-kun spoke, her face brimming with surprise, then gave us a big wave.
やっと見つかった。
The sight of her smile filled me with relief. I instinctively ran up to her. Of course, I couldn't exactly bring myself to hug her or anything like that, so that was as far as it went.
タク、感動の再会だね。また会えて嬉しい。
You're the one who intentionally separated from us in the first place, girl.
どこほっつき歩いてたんだ。
病室、どこかわからなくて、あちこちさまよっちゃった。
Sure. You were looking for a person, not a room.
ひどいよ。置いてくなんて。
Mimi made a show of pretending to cry.
お前が先に行けって言ったんだろ。
そうだったね。で、岸本さんには会えた？
As I nodded, I noticed Misumi-kun was grinning very obviously beside me.
お前岸本にビンタされてただろ。
さて、何のことでしょう？
Mimi must have wanted to hide the fact that Ayase had slapped her. That was why I had been avoiding the topic and leaving it at that. Read the damn room, Misumi-kun.
隠そうったって無駄だぜ。 俺は一部始終を見てたんだ。某家政婦のようにな。
なんだ、バレてたのか。
Her face now pointing down at the floor, Remy gave an awkward sigh, then gazed up at me.
もしかしてタクも見てたの？
そうだ、俺とタクで決定的瞬間をバッチリ見てた。
Dude, you don't just say that. Delusion time.
なんだ、それじゃあ必死にごまかそうとしてたのがバカみたいじゃない。
Okay. Positive.
屋上に行ったらちょうど岸本さんがいたから、つい気になってたことを質問しちゃったの。そしたら機嫌損ねたみたい。
What had she asked?
なんだよ、気になってたことって。
ね、
We gonna see the conversation? Oh,
あな
never
たは
mind.
タクの何なのって。
Of course, of course.
え、
What had she meant by that?
マジで宣戦布告ってやつか。
まあそんなとこかな。
Amy looked bashful. Her gaze darted back and forth between me and the ground.
タクは渡さないからって言っちゃったし、そしたら見事に叩かれたんだけどさ。
You'd wish,
Yeah.
Takime.
女の戦いだな。
Ismi-kun rustled my hair.
おいタク、どうすんだどうすんだよ。
What was he getting at here? I didn't really understand. Actually, it's more like my mind had gone completely blank.
告られてんだぞお前。もう付き合っちまえよ。
Grinning, Mismi-kun suddenly shoved me forward. Caught off guard, I stumbled, and Remy was right in the line of fire. As per the laws of physics, I ended up with my arms around Remy.
ごめん。
My heart was pounding. Remy's body was so soft and warm.
タク、私
I tried to hurry up and get off of her. Remy wrapped her arms. Oh my gosh. Remy wrapped her arms around my back. She nervously brought me in close, hugging me. Electricity ran through me at Remy's surprise attack. In our moment of intimacy, her tender warmth transferred straight over to my body. I wanted to keep feeling that warmth. I wanted Remy to be mine and mine alone. Taken over by those feelings, I hugged her supple body back. Oh no, she looks kind of thin to me. And right as I did, a silhouette standing beyond Remy's shoulder entered my field of vision. It was Ayase, D-sword in hand, looking at me with an expression of bitter hatred. While I couldn't hear what it was, I could tell she was mumbling something. I gulped. War was looming. Blood would be reaped without mercy. And the moment I realized that, I knew I had to escape as soon as possible. To be continued in Love Choo Choo.
おいタク、何ぼーっとしてんだ。行くぞ。
Mismi-kun was calling for me. Mimi also waved at me from beside him. Blinking in a daze, I examined my surroundings. I was definitely not embracing Raimi. Ayase was nowhere in sight.
ドキドキした。
Yeah, I could do without the catfights. Yandere should just stay in the realm of 2D. I don't want anything to do with someone actually like that. Yandere, a girl whose affection, dere, for her romantic interest grows so strong that she starts exhibiting strong emotions, such as jealousy and aggression, before eventually descending into outright insanity. Yawn.
タク早く来いって。
I hurriedly chased after the two. The three of us walking shoulder to shoulder, we made our way through the outpatient lobby. The outpatient reception was already closed, meaning very few people were still there. However, the large TV screen at the end of the lobby was surrounded by around 10 or so people.
何かな。
また新しいニュージェネでも起きたんじゃね？
My body stiffened at what Misumi-kun had so casually said, but immediately after that, Rimi nonchalantly grasped my hand. Thanks to the warmth of her hand, my fear stopped there. The tension in my mind felt like it was melting away. Rimi was my sole support. Rimi gave me peace of mind. Rimi would stay by my side. It might be a little too optimistic, but I felt that as long as Rimi stayed by my side, I could barely, just barely, endure any fear that might come my way. Thank God, Rimi was here for me.
なあ、二人とも来てみろよ。
Misumi-kun had already made it to the TV and was urging me and Rimi over to it. All the other people there, patients both young and old, and even some nurses, had gathered around the TV. Their eyes were glued to the screen. What the hell was going on?
行ってみよう。
The two of us moved to a place where we could see the TV, with me guided along by Rimi's hand. I then timidly turned my eyes to the screen, and when I looked at the captions on the screen, I was completely dumbfounded. What? I assume it's gonna be that Haneda guy that they arrested. Or, well, whatever the name of the guy Senna said, who is probably the homeless guy. Point is, it's probably the homeless guy, I assume. It was a news report announcing the arrest of the new gen culprit.
繰り返しお伝えします。今日午後3時半ごろ、警視庁渋谷署はいわゆるニュージェネレーションの凶器と呼ばれる渋谷で発生した一連の殺人事件のうち、9月29日に起きた通称貼り付け殺人事件の容疑者を逮捕しました。
That's, I can't tell if that's Suwa there or not. It is, I think. I think it is. But, gotta be careful that, this isn't some... Hey, yeah, you guys, we caught the culprit. Shut up now.
殺人容疑で逮捕されたのは無職狛枝慎吾容疑者25歳です。
Yeah, I don't think we've heard that name before.
容疑については先ほど渋谷署で行われた記者会見の通り、今のところ太田久さん殺害についてのみで
Of Ota Hisashi. That's the crucifixion, right?
他の事件に関する容疑は今後追及していく構えです。
Yeah, crucifixion.
狛江田容疑者は太田さん殺害については容疑を認めており、交際している女性が太田さんにしつこくつけ回され、カッとなって首を絞めた。しかしゾンビだったため死なず、貼り付けにして動きを止めた。
And just had a bunch of stakes and ritualistically pinned him up to a wall. Zombie. A person that has been resurrected from the dead. They have lost all sense of their original self and can only move at a slow pace. But in spite of this, they are still ferocious and often attack people. One theory states that zombies originate from a practice seen in voodooism, a practice in which a wrongdoer is placed in a near-death state using a tetrodotoxin-based powder known as zombie powder. These victims are then accidentally buried alive, suffering permanent brain damage due to the lack of oxygen.
などと意味不明の供述をしています。警察の調べでは、狛江田容疑者には現在交際している女性がいないことが明らかになっており、薬物を摂取していた疑いもあるとみて捜査を進めています。
Yeah, kinda hasty to jump to conclusions there. I was in a state of sheer disbelief. The TV screen was repeatedly broadcasting a recording of the suspect being transported by car. The flashes coming from the mass media surrounding the car made the screen flicker violently. Also, did they seriously just release it? Whatever. Happens in the news all the time. The suspect was completely covered by his jacket, so I couldn't see his face.
タク、
Yumi whispered to me as I stared at the TV screen. Her hand squeezed my own.
やっぱりタクは犯人なんかじゃなかったし、将軍っていう人も単なるいたずらだったんだよ。楠木さんだって間違った推理をしてただけ。ね、これで何もかも解決。もう見えない影なんかに怯えることないんだよ。
She was right. Since the culprit behind the crucifixion had been arrested, that automatically meant that it couldn't have been me. I hadn't been sleepwalking, nor did I have multiple personalities. This proved that I was completely normal. And at the same time, it also disproved that I'd seen Remy covered in blood at the scene. It wasn't real. It had to be a delusion I'd come up with. It was over. The nightmare that had been tormenting me without end for almost a month was finally over. Being afraid of shadows, being afraid of God's gaze, trying desperately to get D-sword, none of those things were necessary anymore. But even so, why? Why was there this feeling of unease deep within my chest? Shogun being a prank and the person behind it was just stalking me for shits and giggles. It just didn't feel realistic. Or maybe I was only thinking like that because I'd pretty much forgotten all normal logic and reasoning over the last month. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was on vibrate, but phones still weren't allowed in the hospital. I let go of Remy, exited through the front entrance, then pulled out my phone.
はい。誰？
Husky? I braced myself. You may pass might have started playing again. I quickly went to check the name of the caller. But it was a restricted number. I was hit with a really bad feeling when I frantically went to hang up. Oh no. Sounded like a deep voice for a moment, so I thought it was Hosky. The horribly pained voice that had come through the phone was unmistakably Nanami's.
Nami?
何なの右手を返して。
The shop specializing in ghetto froggy merchandise was known as Top Frog. The pun was likely an attempt to leave a good impression on its customer base, but Bond could only sigh at what he felt was akin to a dad joke. At present, Top Frog had about 20 branches established around the capital region, and it was showing no signs of slowing down in its expansion. Bond was currently visiting the very first branch situated in Harajuku, a place often cited as paradise by the biggest Garo Froggy fans. Bond, however, quickly came to regret this decision.
なあ、ゆあちゃん。帰っていいか
He spoke in a low voice to Yua, the girl that had guided him to the shop.
でも百瀬さんからゲロカエルンを買ってくるように頼まれてるんじゃ。
だってよ、おじさんだけ明らかに浮いてるからさ。
Scores of young people happily trotted around Takeshita Dori, but the vast majority passed by without even so much as glancing at the shop. Only a few people were standing inside the actual store. In fact, aside from Bon and Yua, there were only 3 customers in total, all of which were high school girls. Due to Bon's unkempt appearance, walking along Takeshita Dori with Yua inevitably served to portray him as a man of obscene intentions. He was just going to buy one of the plushes that was so popular nowadays. But that was what any stereotypical old pervert would say. A notion that brought down Bond's spirits considerably. On top of that,
なんか誰かに見られてるような気がするんだよな。いい年して自意識過剰かもしんねえが。
それ私もです。
I think about it, Husky had that moment of feeling like somebody was watching her. Wonder if that ties into why she's acting like this, seemingly now. Or if she just always had that.
最近誰かの視線を感じて、たまにすごく怖くなるんですよ。
なんで俺だけじゃなかったか
Whose eyes are those eyes?
ゆあちゃんの場合は心配だな。ストーカーに付け狙われてたりしたら。
そんな怖いこと言わないでください。
I occasionally pump in to see you, Bon, as do I you, Bon.
安心しな。そんな奴がいたら俺が逮捕してやるから。
Resolving the topic with a grin, Bond stared fixedly at the various frog characters lined up along the shelves.
ところで、ゆあちゃんはここに来るのは何度目だ
私も初めてです。
あんまり客がいねえようだが。静かなブームってやつなのか
金曜日から日曜日にかけてはすごく混んでるらしいです。あ、つまり新作が発売されて週末の間だけですね。特に金曜日はものすごく並ぶらしくて。
Yeah, a new type every weekend.
学生のために18時に販売開始なんですけど、噂だとその行列だけで竹下通りが埋め尽くされるとか。
週末だけね。ますます怪しいな。
Bon went to pick up. Sorry. Bon went to pick up 2 of the Tirigero froggies that had been released last week, then headed to the register. Yua, not buying anything herself, followed behind him.
射精
The store employee was a vacuous-looking man in his 20s. His hair had been dyed green and he had earrings in, and his name was Kevin. I wonder who he is. If he were not behind the register, he certainly would not look like a clerk to the passing observer. At the very least, it was no outfit to be serving customers in. It was weirdly like almost like a kind of church getup. The employee stared at the two without relent nor restraint.
娘さんへのプレゼントってやつっすか？
いやー、そうなんだよね。この子がどうしてもって言うから。まあ、たまには父親らしいことしてやらんとね。
Bon forced a smile as he looked ingratiatingly at the younger shop clerk. Yuba's gaze fell to the floor as her face turned to one of shock. Nonetheless, she did not break the father and daughter charade.
それより、このカエルに興味あるんだけど、ちょっと話聞かせてもらっていいかな？ゲコカエルンってそんなに人気あるの？
っていうかゲロカエルんすよ。バンバン人気あってやばいっす。
ああ、ゲプカエルンね。いつも週末に新作が出るんでしょ。
ゲロカエルんだって言ってんじゃんマジ。っていうか新作とかそういう言い方マジやめてよ。新ガエルだから。
Avant ghetto.
金土日と超並んでバンバン売れるんでマジやばいっすよ。マジでバンバン売れるっすから。バンバンっすよマジで。
Yua's brow narrowed in response to the young man. Bonkers seemed to be a favorite word of the shop clerk, and something felt odd to her about it. Why is he emphasizing part of it so much? She wondered. It likely was not intentional, but it almost felt as if the young clerk was saying Bond's name in some capacity.
これメイドインチャイナってラベルに書いてあるだけなんだけど、メーカーとかわかる？
は？メーカー？つうかゲロカエルにブランドとかねえし、ゲロカエルはゲロカエルんじゃね？それで完結してね。おっさんマジウケんだけど。教えとくと、ゲロカエルんって作ってんじゃねえから。マジバンバン生まれてっから。
Machi Bon Bon. Unsurprisingly, the conversation was getting to be too much for Bon, leaving him on the verge of rupture. In order to prevent this, he swiftly ended the conversation, handed over the money, then left the store with Yua in tow.
店員の教育がなってねえな。今時の若い連中ときたらもうろくに会話もできやしねえ。大体なんだあの格好は。もう
そうですね。あ。
Yua came to an abrupt halt. She grabbed Bon's suit cuff and pulled him to a stop as well.
見てください、バンさん。
どうした？
Yua was pointing in the direction of a white 2-ton truck. It was pulled over on the side of the road, and a number of cardboard boxes were being unloaded from the cargo bed. The boxes were carried one after the other into the back of the Gero Froggy shop.
明日発売になるゲジカエルの新作か。
Gero Frogapete.
ゲロカエルンです。
ゆあちゃん、よく見つけたな。偉いぞ。
いえ、そんな。
Usually, the cargo bed of the truck would have a company name or logo emblazoned on it somewhere, but the one before Bon and Yua was completely blank. However, the cardboard boxes being carried inside had something resembling a company name written beside a few Gero Froggy illustrations.
有限会社新興。
Faithworks
聞いたことある
Limited.
か？
ありません。
Sounds religious.
となれば困った時のももちゃん頼みだな。
Ugh. Get back into that Takumi voice. We parted ways with Misumi-kun at the station, then headed straight back to my base. The whole way there, it felt like I was stumbling through a nightmare. Nanami's face kept popping into my mind, and each time it did, her expression was different. Nanami had always been the type to wear her heart on her sleeve. When she was angry, she'd puff out her cheeks and pout. And when she was happy, she'd smile so wide it'd make even me embarrassed. Memories of all those different expressions made my heart thump again and again, almost painfully so. That phone call from before, the things she'd said, what the hell had they meant? They could only mean that the bandage wrapped around her arm when I'd seen her at school must have been... Where could she be now? At school? Or maybe she'd already gone back home.
Taku, ほら、前見て歩かないと転んじゃうよ。
Supported by Rimi, the two of us came out on the roof. Whoosh! Negative.
どうしたの？
これから実家に帰ってみようと思うんだ。
Introduce your girlfriend.
急だね。
歩いても30分もかからないところなんだ。それで一緒についてきてほしい。
As I made that request, I was so nervous, my heart felt like it would burst out of my chest. I was even somewhat surprised that those words had managed to come out of my mouth at all. Asking someone for something, it was something I'd never been able to do before now.
嫌だよ。
She firmly declined.
私、行きたくない。
I couldn't believe my ears. I would have never thought she'd respond like that. Before that moment, Rimi had always listened to me, no matter how selfish I was being. She had always helped me, supported me. So I'd assumed that she would agree without question, no matter what I asked her. But now that I thought about it again, I was the weird one for assuming she'd never refuse. I'd gotten too used to her taking care of me. I was being too presumptuous, expecting too much of her.
そう。
それに、
Mimi turned her back to me. Then she wrapped her arms around herself.
それに、タクも行かない方がいい。
それってどういう？
実家には戻らないで。
Ooh. She spoke firmly, almost like she was ordering me not to go. I was at a loss. I had no idea what Remy was trying to achieve by saying that. What kind of face was Remy making as she had her back to me? I didn't know.
わけがわからない。
あなたは何も知らなくていい。
Her voice carried a sense of urgency. She felt like a completely different person from before.
ここでこのコンテナハウスだけでずっと生きていけばいいの。
Interesting. We have yet to physically see Takami's parents in the first place. But yeah, Remy absolutely knows something that we're not being told yet. Like, I mean, Takumi seems to know where the house is. He said it was about 30 minutes on foot. There's also the fact that Nanmi exists. I'll just keep going.
そうしてもらわないと困るんだ。
Stay in the container for the rest of your life, or this won't end well. Damn, girl. Won't end well. Wait, this was a delusion, right? Or was it real? Suddenly, a high-pitched sound pierced my ears. One that sounded almost like a woman's scream. A strong gust of wind swept over the rooftop. The air trembled. Uh-oh, the sky is the same color it was at the beginning of the game. My vision was overwhelmed by a blinding sheet of deep crimson. With no idea what had just happened, I turned my face to the light. And when I looked on top of the container house, there she stood. Aoi Senna, D-sword in hand. The source of the light was her D-sword, glimmering against the sky. But something was strange. When I'd seen it before, Senna's D-sword had emitted a blue glow. The sound vanished. The wind stopped.
答える。
Her voice was sharp, her glare cold. Her eyes glistened with unmistakable animosity.
これを書いたのはお前か。
As she spoke, she thrust out a piece of paper with IR2 scribbled on it. My essay. For some reason, it was all scratched up. Why did Senna have that? Why was Senna here? Illegal trespassing. Those words popped into my head, immediately followed by the realization that she had searched my room. But what for?
答えろと言っている。
そうだけど、だから。
Next came the sound of CoZ's inner voice. She was behind Senna. She was clinging to Senna's legs, and her face was peeking out from behind them. She had an urgent look on her face as she looked at me. Right as Kozupi screamed, Senna leapt from the roof. She held the sword high and... Rimi yanked my arm, and I fell backward. She saw the sword! But also, Senna has real booted it before. I quickly looked back up, then saw the place I'd been standing only moments prior. Senna's sword had hollowed out the floor of the rooftop. It had such insane destructive power, such tremendous sharpness, that it didn't feel real. The impact had been great enough to destroy the concrete, and yet the sword didn't even have a scratch on it. Weren't these swords supposed to be things people can see, let alone touch? A certain term crossed my mind. Real boot. Her sword had been real booted. Through the mutual recognition of the four people here, Senna's D-sword had gone from her delusion to reality. It was now a great sword that could cut down a person for real. If Rimi hadn't pulled me away in time, I would have been bisected from head to toe by that beautiful sword of hers. It would have been instant death. Shivers ran down my entire body. Just now, Senna had unmistakably tried to kill me. Why? My head was overrun with confusion. The two of us had been eating crunchy goods together just the other day. Kozuki had been there with us. It was true that our relationship wasn't far enough for me to call us friends, and that even back then, Senna had been acting scary the whole time. But even so, she shouldn't have hated me enough to suddenly come after me with a D-sword. This has to do with Haneda. Senna raised her hand. She glared at me even more intensely than before. Her movements were incredibly fast, in spite of the fact that she was holding a gigantic sword. She kicked off the ground like she was starting a 500-meter dash. The tip of her sword scraped against the ground as she brandished it. Closing the distance between us, she raised the weapon above her head. In that instant, my instincts worked out exactly what kind of situation I was in. She was serious. Senna was deathly serious. As I lay face up in a total heap, I let out a shriek. I couldn't run away. None of this made any sense. Getting a game over like this. Desperately running away from Shogun and getting surprise attacked by Senna as a result of it. It was far too ridiculous. Far too sudden. I didn't want this. I didn't want to die. I really didn't want to die. Right then, a single silhouette leapt above me and landed between me and Senna. When I looked to see who it was, I realized it was Rimi. She stretched her arms out wide to bar the way of the approaching girl. Was she putting her life on the line just to shield me? But if she did that, she was gonna die. I didn't want that. Suddenly, what Kozupi had said before reappeared in my mind. Pale light leaked past Rimi's outstretched arms. Rimi.
タクに手を出さないで。
Unifying the overflowing light, she placed her arms together. The air warped and shook. Coming seemingly from thin air, feathers of shining light burst around Remy and danced in the surrounding air. And then, what appeared in her hands. Effortlessly blocked the fierce downward swing of Senna's gigantic sword.
タクを追い詰めないで。
It was all too graceful to be called a sword, all too imperial, enough to be easily mistaken for the wings of an angel. Then I realized a certain fact, that she, Sakihata Rimi, was a gigalomaniac. Whoosh! Damn! She's dual wielding. I guess we're in Senna's perspective now. Damn. 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 Overwhelmed with shock, Aoi Senna looked at the face of the girl that stood before her. That winged sword that had so effortlessly blocked the attack of her D-sword was clearly a D-sword itself. What do you even call that weapon? If the girl she now faced was not accustomed to wielding such a D-sword, she would not have been able to block Senna's attack with such perfect timing.
先花さんもギガロマニアックスだったのら。
CoZ stared down at the three people from atop the container house. As if she was a spectator, her dangling legs swung back and forth, again and again. Sure acting carefree for someone who ruined my surprise attack, thought Senna, clicking her tongue inside her head. However, despite her moving thoughts, she did not remove her gaze from Remy's eyes. Her opponent had a brooding look on her face. Nishijo Takumi moaned from behind Remy, having sunk to the ground in a pathetic display. Senna's target was ultimately him, so she had no intention of fighting with Remy. Besides, this was no manga, nor was it an anime, so a D-sword battle was not a particularly realistic thing to occur.
その男が何をしたか知っているのか IR2 という公式を。
知ってるよ。
Senna had been interrupted by a quiet, sorrowful, yet decisive response. Upon hearing that, Senna tightened the grip of her D-sword.
それなら
タクを覚醒させればもっと大変なことになる。
その前に殺す。
あなたには無理だよ。
Senna decided that there was no point in talking further. She brandished her sword in an EI stance, or lie stance, I don't know. Before her, Remy stood readily. Nishijo Takumi lay about 5 long strides away from her. At this distance, it would take 3 seconds to resolve things completely. Without hesitation, Senna rushed toward Remy from the front. Aiming straight for the girl, she swept her D-sword toward her flank. I swear this girl changes artists when she pulls those out. Remy attempted to block it like before, but Senna's strike had been a feint. Her sword passed through both Rimi's sword and body. She had released the real boot. At present, Senna's D-sword was no more than a delusion. It could touch nothing. It could cut nothing. It could kill nothing. But that had been her very aim. Due to having twisted her body to block the attack, Rimi's reactions would be slowed. During that time frame, Senna had already slipped past her and made it 2 steps closer to Takumi. She real-booted the sword once again in an instant. This is it. Takumi faced Senna with eyes of fear as she effortlessly real-booted the sword. With her D-sword that had once again become real, she moved to pierce Takumi's heart.
Senna.
A figure flew past the corner of her vision. The instant she heard its voice, the girl, fiercely shaken by it, missed her target. The tip of the sword grazed Takumi's leg and stabbed into the concrete. Senna slowly raised her head, then let out an angry growl. At the edge of the roof, their form lit by the backdrop of the setting sun, stood a single man, like a phantom among the corporeal. Hello there. His face was pale, deathly so. The pupils that resided within his sunken eyes were surrounded by bloodshot whites. His head hung toward the concrete, his face without expression. The instant Senna saw the man, neither Takumi nor nothing else mattered to her anymore. The man Senna had chased after without end, her sole object of hatred. The man that had abandoned her and betrayed his family entirely. That very man now stood right before her very eyes.
ようやく見つけた。
Senna took a step toward the man, gritting her teeth to hold back her overflowing hatred. She once again brandished her D-sword. Another step forward.
どうしようもなかった。私はお前の母さんを生贄に捧げるしかなかったんだ。
Oh boy.
黙れ。
母さんの最後、とても安らかなものだった。だからセナ、安心してほしい。母さんのおかげで素晴らしい実験結果が出た。母さんは世界のために役立ったんだ。お前も母さんの功績を誇っていい。
黙れよ。
Blood rushed to Senna's head, rendering her no longer able to see anything other than the man that stood before her. She dashed. It happened in an instant. She flew at the man's breast, closed the distance between herself and it, then sunk her D-sword deep into its center. That was Senna's long-held desire. She had roamed Shibuya daily for the sole purpose of killing this man. She had dreamt of the day she would kill him countless times. It had never left her mind.
やっと母さんの仇を。
She went to remove her sword, which would grant her the opportunity to move away from the man. But before her sword could come free, the man wrapped his arms around Senna and gently embraced her.
よせ、気安く触るな。
Her entire body stood on end. Him doing this now, after everything that had happened, only served to nauseate her. Long ago, In the distant past, the bond of family between Senna and the man had been severed. Even so, for some reason she was unable to comprehend. Senna could not bring herself to throw off the man, an inability that deeply surprised her. His warmth, his large chest, the deeply real presence of her father, her hands dyed in red.
私はこんなのあなたが
望んだ妄想だ。
望んだ妄想だよ。
When she heard that whisper, Senna immediately understood. Errors slipped into dead spots. Psychological attacks. Enchantment. Seeing someone's delusions. When Senna realized her mistake, it was already too late. She lost her balance and, together with the man, her body was cast off the roof. To Senna, the ground that lay 8 stories below looked oh so far away. Unable to comprehend what the hell was going on, all I could do was watch as the scene unfolded. Senna had suddenly run to the edge of the roof, lost her balance for no reason I could see, and was about to plunge to the ground right this very second. Her body was about to disappear beyond the edge.
落ちる
I could only let out a whisper. I tightly closed my eyes. She had committed suicide. Senna had intentionally dove to her death. I didn't understand why. As if I could understand. She'd assaulted me out of nowhere. Serves her right. That girl had just been yet another enemy. No matter how long I waited, the resounding splat of her body hitting concrete did not come. I timidly opened my eyes and tried to see what was going on. Senna wasn't falling. Instead, she was on her knees. Remy stood right beside her. She was holding Senna's arm. Had Remy saved her? Senna threw her D-sword away and started crying like a child. What the hell was even going on anymore? From my perspective, it looked like Senna had tried to die of her own volition.
辛い思いさせてごめんね。でもしょうがなかったの。
Remy had done something to Senna. The usual bright and happy girl I was used to felt like an entirely different person now. A brooding face, sorrowful whispers, quivering eyes. The girl standing over there wasn't the Remy I knew.
先畑さん。
A voice reverberated in my mind. CoZ hadn't moved from her position on top of the container house, meaning she was still staring down at us.
もう終了だよね。
You are seriously screwed up.
もしもセナさんのことぐしゃばきってしようとしてるならコズピ許さないポン。先畑さんのことバラバラにしちゃうよ。
Damn. A chill ran down my spine. CoZ was speaking with her usual airheaded, anime-esque tone of voice, but the things she was saying were deadly serious.
もう終わり。もともと葵さんのことどうこうするつもりはないし、タクの前から消えてくれるならこのまま解放する。 それは無理だってコズピーとセナちゃんとタクミちゃんはお友達だもん。
Can't really call her a friend after this.
ねそうでしょタクミちゃん。
The gears in my mind refused to move. If someone told me that everything that had just happened was a dream, I'd probably believe them just like that. Come to think of it, why had Senna attacked me so suddenly? Was Senna my enemy after all?
お前のせいで。
Senna raised her hand as she sobbed. She made no attempt to wipe away her tears. It stayed on the ground where she had fallen to her knees. Her gaze was fixed on me.
お前のせいで私の家族は。
I was completely bewildered. She launched nothing but raw emotion at me. What the hell did she think I'd done? I hadn't done anything. I hadn't screwed with anyone's lives. And I certainly didn't know a damn thing about Senna's family. I was harmless as could be.
無害だと。
She'd read my mind.
お前が生み出したものが世界を滅ぼすかもしれないっていうのに。
Whoops, sorry. Destroy the entire world? More Junie shit again. I turned my gaze to Rimi for help, but she had her back to us. She stared vacantly at the darkening sky.
無駄だよ。
Her figure, her voice, was the sheer loneliness they gave off, merely in my imagination.
タクは何も知らないから。
With that statement, Rimi spoke as if she knew everything there was to know.
ふざけるな。今渋谷を襲っている混乱は全部あの公式が発端なんだぞ。
Formula.
それ以上言わないで。タクは本当に何も知らないの。
From the sounds of it, she was talking about me, but I couldn't follow the conversation at all. I'm starting to wonder if, like, well, I've been thinking about it for a while, but I wonder if, like, this Takumi is, like, one half of a person, and Shogun is another half.
公式ってこれのこと？
Kosupi leapt down from the container house, holding my essay in her hand. She held out the back of the essay to us. I saw what I doodled on it back in elementary school. IR2. The chaos infesting Shibuya right now had started from this. Talk about an absurd accusation. There was no way in hell some random doodle could affect anything, let alone of that magnitude. I just doodled the thing on a complete whim when I was bored or something. Probably. It was a long time ago, so I didn't remember it all that well. But I did know that there was no real meaning behind it. I just copied down the numbers I'd seen in a dream. And you said that you saw your future self come to you. It was a dream related to whose eyes are those eyes, which I'd written about on the front. I'd used those words all the time, since even before I'd written it. Whenever I had, it would all take shape in my dreams more and more. Within one of those dreams were numbers.
FUN の10乗かける INT の40乗イコール
IR2。
After a while, Senna wiped the tears from her eyes. Now they were a deep scarlet. While still on the ground, while still hanging her head down in regret, she formed a sentence.
この公式をお前が生み出した瞬間、世界は分岐したんだ。
Whoosh! Whoosh.
ノア2に搭載されている中で最も秀でているのは中核システムに組み込まれたとある方程式です。これは人類史上未だ回答が見つかっていないとされているもの。
ミレニアム7のうちの一つかね。
Millennium Prize Problems, a series of 7 math problems that were published in the year 2000 CE by the Clay Mathematics Institute in the United States. The 7 problems had never been solved prior to their publication, and a $1 million prize was promised to anyone that managed to solve any of the 7. As of 2007, only 1 of the problems has been solved, and there are 6 remaining.
億単位の懸賞金がかけられているという数学界で未だ未解決の7つの問題か。
いいえ、その7つの中には入っていません。ですが、実はミレニアム7はもともと問題が8つあった。公開前に1つだけ削除されたのです。
それがノア2に組み込まれている方程式だと。
削除された理由は？
世界に最悪をまき散らす可能性があるためというところです。
一体どのような数式なのだ？
基本相互作用における電磁気力を想定した共鳴現象、
Fundamental interaction.
それを表す計算式です。
Fun int. Fundamental interaction. In physics, this refers to any of the 4 basic forces that interact between elementary particles. These are elementary interaction, gravitational interaction, weak interaction, and strong interaction. A theory that explains all elemental particles and the 4 fundamental interactions in a unified manner has yet to be established. If such a theory were ever finalized, it is predicted that it would be able consistently, yeah, I think that's a typo there, consistently explain everything from the subatomic scale to the far corners of the universe. But yeah, that would mean like fundamental to the power of 10 times interaction to the power of 40 equals IR2. Hmm.
これにより特定の電磁パルスと受容体とが近接作用することで発現する未知の力が解明されました。各国が30年以上かけて開発し積み上げてきた沈黙の兵器の研究成果を一瞬にして過去のものとしてしまったんですよ。
その問題に回答を見つけた者は神になるに等しいというわけだ。
それを君が果たしたというわけかね。
So, is IR2 the answer, and FUN and fun, and that the beginning of the equation is just like the equation as currently unsolved?
それはとても不思議な場所から見つかりました。子供の落書きというね。
Oh, never mind. It is the whole formula.
IR2。
Yep.
NoAH2のいわゆるハードウェア部分はこの公式によって 神に匹敵する能力を手に入れました。あとはソフトウェア部分に相当するギガロマニアックスのコードサンプルを集めれば、ノア2は本格的に稼働し、我々の望むもの全てを実現してくれるでしょう。
かのアインシュタインが現代に生きていればと思うよ。彼は高い能力を持つギガロマニアックスだったと聞く。
家庭の話よりも現状がどうなっているかだ。
I too I too love making historical figures into superhuman beings. Like what was it again? I think JFK was a mutant in yeah, JFK was a mutant in the X-Men series.
ギガロマニアックスは世界中に数えるほどしかいないというではないか。大丈夫なのか？
すでに5人分のサンプルは確保しました。
ノア2稼働に十分な数は集まったようだね。
ならば結構。
ただサンプルが多ければ多いほどノア2の能力は向上します。
I'm still wondering what this has to do with the new gen murders.
特にどうしてもサンプルを採取したいギガロマニアックスの少年が一人いましてね。
だからといって計画の遅延は許されんぞ。
He didn't necessarily say it's the same boy who made the formula.
ノア2の本格稼働はいつ頃になりそうなのかね。
稼働前に最終実験としてサードメルトを行います。
また地震を起こそうと？
予測規模は？
想定では関東大震災と同レベル。
Oh, crap.
関東大震災クラスだと？
マグニチュード 7.9 だったかな。
現在の建築基準と免震対策レベルを考えれば町にかつてほどの大きな損害を及ぼすことはないでしょ
う。だが犠牲者の数はファーストセカンドの比ではなかろ
う。およそ5000人ほどといったところです。少なく見積もって
So casual.
問題が？
責任は貴様が取るのだろうな。
腹でも切って死んでみせますか？これが最終実験です。サードメルトが予定通りの成果を上げたとき、ノア2は完全なる完成を見る。世界の可能性は我らの手の中に。
この公式をお前が生み出した瞬間、世界は分岐したんだ。
分岐って？
What? Like with the roots? This wasn't an eroge.
タク、もう行こう。話聞く必要なんてないよ。
Rimi pulled on my hand, pleading me to go inside my room. Her demeanor oozed feelings of desperation. Rimi was afraid of something. I wonder if part of the reason he's up here wasn't actually his own decision, but to keep him hidden.
葵さんが言ってることは全部嘘っぱちだし。
嘘はそっちだろ。
葵さん、もう帰って。タクの前から消えてよ。
Who should I believe?
たかが数式になんでそんなに目くじら立てるんだよ。
I get the feeling that maybe, like, Rimi already knows Takumi, but, like, not in the way that he understands. Like, if Shogun were actually this other half of Takumi, then maybe that whole Takumi is the boy that Remy actually knows, and she's protecting him.
本当に何も分かってないのか。アインシュタインが唱えた E イコール MC の事情、これが発表されたことで核兵器が開発されるという未来が生まれたように。
E equals MC2, an equation in the theory of special relativity, as defined by Albert Einstein. It stands for energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. This equation shows that mass and energy are equivalent.
お前の生み出した IR2 もまた E イコール MC の事情と同じ、いやそれ以上の影響力を世界に与えている。 IR2 は沈黙の兵器を現実のものとした。
沈黙の兵器。
思考盗撮、視覚投影、五感制御。
Wasn't that the patented technology Senna had told me about before? The one that she was investigating?
ギガロマニアックスは特別。いや、異常ではなくなる。これからはこの忌々しい力を誰もが自由に使えるようになるんだ。 IR2 を元に作られた装置によってな。もっともその前に一握りの腐った連中に独占され、人々は気づかないうちに家畜同然の立場になるよう洗脳されてしまうだろうが。
Like, Nozomi. How would I have known all this? Go on and on about this shit till the end of time. It still wouldn't change that I didn't know anything. Even if Senna was speaking the truth, I never would have intentionally tried to make something so horrifying. Not in a million years. It was just a doodle made by a kid. I hadn't done anything wrong.
それならそのアイアーム2は
IR2
それはギガロマニアックスの力のことをキュッピーンって説明したものなんだ。やっぱりあのおじさんが言ってたのは本当だったのら。
Oh.
一番重要なのはその目、誰の目を生み出した少年なんだって。それってたくみちゃんのことだったんだね。
Kosupi spoke in such a carefree tone. I would never be able to act as innocent as she could. Just like me, Remy also showed no signs of answering. Senna, meanwhile, opened her eyes wide and raised her head with a start. She rose to her feet, staggering. Why was her footing so unsteady? Did it have something to do with what Remy had done to her earlier?
CoZ、お前今なんて言った？
ホビ？
Senna drew closer to the puzzled girl, pressing her for answers.
おじしゃんって誰のことだ？
ね、コズピーに理想度の大切さを教えてくれた人。東京に来て初めて話した人なの。なんかね、ふぎゅーって鼻つまみたくなっちゃう格好してて、へんてこなこと書いた板持ってたの。世界は終わるとかとか。
なんでそれを早く言わなかった？
そんなこと言われても。
あいつだ。やっと見つけた。
Me, Remy, and Kozupi, the three of us, unable to understand what Senna meant, could only watch with confusion as Senna's blood-curdling demeanor boiled and bubbled.
やっとあいつを殺せる。
Whoosh! Whoosh. There had once been a certain experiment, but it was an experiment she had known nothing of. She was a perfectly ordinary housewife and had been blessed with a second child in her womb before turning 40. Now, perhaps perfectly ordinary might not have fit her quite so well. After all, her eldest daughter was already old enough to enter high school, a 15-year gap from the second child. She had been slightly worried that her eldest daughter, adolescent that she was, would oppose the pregnancy. However, the exact opposite proved to be true. Her daughter's heart sang when she heard the news. Her husband, an established scientist, often lost himself in his research and faith, and rarely ever came home to his family. But when he was home, he always did his best to be a good husband and father, and faith. So while she housed some dissatisfactions, they would never surpass the love she held for her husband. Her second child was delivered without issue, a healthy girl of 2,579 grams. She named the child Mana. Soon after, her husband was unfortunately made to transfer far away. Her husband held no capacity to support himself, even with the most basic of life skills, forcing her to ask her stable daughter to go with him and tend to her father's needs. Since she was now living alone with the newborn Mana, they then opted to move to an affordable company housing as per her husband's plan. She had initially been living in an apartment within the suburbs, but this made transport inconvenient. The new company house, however, was in the best area in Shibuya, and many of her husband's colleagues' families lived close by. Her considerate husband claimed that, because of this, there would be nothing to worry about in her times of need, including when she needed help with the baby. Every room in the company house was spacious, and she particularly favored the bedroom. One wall was home to a large mirror, and the opposite wall had an even larger window. From there, she could view the luscious greenery of Yoyogi Park. She then went on to quickly befriend a housewife living close by, and received extraordinary treatment from the company, namely being provided a housekeeper. She was proud of her husband for holding such an important position within his company, one that allowed her to live in such a luxurious way. And so, her life without worries nor dissatisfaction continued. 2 years passed. While Mana had experienced delayed growth, she had grown into a healthy child, all while not contracting any major illnesses. She was a very pampered child. If she did not cradle Mana in her arms, the girl would start crying in a voice so shrill it could shatter even the thickest glass. Regrettably, she had fallen ill about a month prior. A particularly grave symptom was a fierce tinnitus, something she suffered from throughout most hours of the day. Fortunately for her, the housekeeper and the housewife next door were more than willing to assist her with taking care of Mana. Regardless of the help she received, she was essentially joined at the hip with Mana, and was never able to part from her for even a moment. Even when going to the bathroom, even when taking a bath. If a thought were to even cross her mind about having the housekeeper cradle the baby for a short time, Mana would detect these intentions and immediately burst into tears. Contrary to what one might surmise, she actually found endearment in how much Mana clung to her. But due to the inseparability of the two, she continued to live a life where she could never even take a single step out of her own home. Her lifestyle was entirely supported by the housekeeper and the housewife. For her, meeting the two had become her true saving grace. However, over time, something odd began to happen with the two helpers. During a friendly chat in the living room that had occurred a week prior, the housewife had spontaneously vomited without warning. Paying no heed to the confusion she showed, the housewife then rushed outside. She had not seen her since, leaving her to worry that perhaps she had fallen ill. Concerned, she decided to ask the housekeeper if she could check on her. As the housekeeper left that day, she made her request, concluding with an "I'd love your help tomorrow as well, dear." And yet, when the housekeeper heard these words, she suddenly burst into tears and could only nod again and again as she departed. The tinnitus that had been tormenting her so became fiercer that night, to the point where it felt as if her head itself might split apart. She tried calling an ambulance, but the line refused to connect. She then tried going outside to ask the neighboring housewife for help, but even that proved too much for her. Throughout all of this, her daughter had continued to cry incessantly, further agitating her pain. In order to endure this terrible pain, she embraced her beloved Mana. And as she did so, both the tinnitus and the crying abruptly stopped. The pain in her head vanished just as suddenly, almost as if it had never been there to begin with. She then looked down, only to see that the child she was holding was now a mummified corpse. In spite of how heavily it had been crying until that very moment, the body had suddenly become a desiccated, rotting mound of flesh, one that gave off the most repulsive stench. And so, before she could ever realize it was all an experiment, her mind broke. There had once been a certain experiment, but it was an experiment that ran different to how he had hypothesized. He was a scientist at Nozomi Technology, a follower of the Cosmic Church of the Divine Light, the man at the center of Nozomi's strictly confidential Project NoAH, and the man that had deciphered fun to the power of 10 times int to the power of 40 equals IR2. He had offered his wife on the verge of childbirth as a test subject for the experiment. While that had been an instruction from the founder that he revered, it had been just as much his own suggestion, all to ensure the success of the experiment. It was christened the Mana experiment, after the code name given to their second daughter. His eldest daughter of 15 was placed in a Cosmic Church of the Divine Light institution, all while he observed his confined wife and infant child for 24 hours a day. His wife had been led to believe that the place she resided in was a company house, but in reality, it was a test site that Nozomi Technology had prepared, a site containing the NoAH 2 prototype he was developing. Mind reading, visual projection, and control over the 5 senses. In order to research the effects of such practices, he locked his wife and daughter, Mana, in the site as test subjects. Not much was known about the effects of electromagnetic radiation on the human body, so he very much intended to halt the experiment immediately if his wife or child showed any strange abnormalities. The experiment was then met with an unfortunate accident soon after it began. Mana passed away at 1 month of age, her cause of death unknown. It was an accident nobody could have prevented. He was overcome with sorrow and attempted to bring the experiment to a close, and yet such a thing was not permitted to him.
実に興味深いではないですか。
Those were the words of his employer. His employer was referring to the bizarre sight visible within the experiment. His wife did not seem to recognize Mana's death as real, and instead treated her remains as if they were still her child. In her eyes, Mana had never died, but in truth, these things were all a simple projection, a reality only she was privy to. This was an effect of the NoAH 2 prototype, and in a certain sense, the situation provided an optimal opportunity to test its capabilities. Consequently, he had his wishes disregarded. Eventually, even he came to think that continuing the experiment would be best, for his wife's sake. Looking upon the one-way mirror, his wife would embrace the corpse of their child, and lived her every day in blissful happiness. She would gaze through the window toward the greenery of Yoyogi Park, but in reality, the window was a mere wallpaper, and the scenery a projection. And yet, she simply smiled at the view, all while gently tending to her child as she cooed. Staff belonging to the research team would take care of his wife, with one playing the role of a neighboring housewife and the other a housekeeper. As long as the experiment continued, her mind would never break. As such, he told himself that this was all for his wife's sake. Though in truth, perhaps his mind had been broken far before his wife's ever could. At some point in time, his goal had changed from completing NoAH 2 to forcing his wife to continue living an endless dream. After continuing the experiment for 2 years, his employer suddenly announced an end to the project.
データは十分取れました。NoAH 2本格稼働は間近です。この実験ももう続ける意味はないでしょう。
He vehemently opposed this, his desperation evident. And yet, this passion had him branded a traitor, and he was subsequently removed from the project. As a gesture of kindness, he was permitted to be present at the test site on the final day of the experiment, albeit within restraints. And with him, his daughter, of whom he had not seen across those full 2 years, was forced to be present. A look of bewilderment rose to her face when she noticed him.
父さん、これはどういうこと？母さんに何をしたの？母さんが抱いているのは一体。
He was unable to answer. His guilt over what he had done prevented him from looking his daughter in the eye. Meanwhile, the start of a ghastly ritual was drawing near. The housewife had long since become unable to endure Mana's rotting stench, and the housekeeper had left the test site in tears in response to his wife's words. Then the equipment was stopped. The dream ended, and his wife broke. In her eyes, what was once her child had suddenly transformed into a mummy, a sight that brought her to scratch at her scalp, tear out her hair, dig her fingernails into the flesh of her face, and then began to ravenously devour the desiccated body of her own child. Through every tear of flesh, she continued to laugh maniacally, bang her head against the wall, before eventually she took a kitchen knife, drove the blade into her own eyes, and died right where she stood. The daughter cried and screamed as she watched her mother's horrific end from beyond the one-way mirror. His daughter was then taken away by two researchers, with one taking hold of each arm. He was not even granted the opportunity to pursue his only remaining relative. I assume they did that to break her. He blamed himself for everything, believing he had reaped what he himself had sowed. Regardless of his reasons, when he had resolved to continue the experiment 2 years ago, it had been obvious how things would end. Mere days after bearing witness to his wife's death, he vanished. And now, nary a soul knew of his current whereabouts. After everything had settled, Senna had gone on to interrogate CoZ. Okay. After everything... Well, actually, I need to... Yeah, I can't just go back into that. That was, man. Gosh. Yeah, man. Just horrible. Just horrible. Well, Senna's personality certainly makes a lot more sense now. Oh, man. Well, I'll just continue. Can't really put my thoughts into words anyways. After everything had settled, Senna had gone on to interrogate CoZ about something with bloodshot eyes. And then after doing that for a bit, she ran off somewhere on her own. CoZ had chased after her, but I, meanwhile, had just been staying put. Still incredibly confused as to why Senna had become so obsessive all of a sudden. And now I was trudging to Shimoki Tazawa. My parents' house was only a short distance away. Walking from my base to it took less than half an hour. Could Nanami be there? Though not as busy as Shibuya itself, the roads of Shimoki Tazawa were fairly crowded. I was still being hit by the aftermath of that Esper debacle. Namely, some passersby looked at me with mocking sneers, while others even took pictures of me on their phones. Overwhelmed by embarrassment and humiliation, I hurried along the road to home.
ごめんね。
Rimi's eyes were pointed to the ground as she said that. She was walking a bit behind me, and in the time we'd spent moving along, she already repeated those words over 10 times.
黙ってて。ごめん。
No matter how much she apologized, I had no way of answering. I didn't know anything about Rimi. Nothing had changed ever since we'd first met. And yet, she supported me. She stayed by my side. But at the end of the day, there was still so much I didn't know about her. Even so, I'd always brushed that issue out of my mind. Perhaps it was because something in me knew that she wouldn't stay with me if I knew the truth. And that terrified me.
どうして僕と一緒にいてくれるの？
I worked up the courage and asked her what was on my mind. I asked her the reason why she would stay with a guy like me. Was it because she was trying to lure me into a trap the entire time, just like you had? And yet, despite my suspicions, the answer she gave was nothing of the sort.
あなたに目覚めてほしくないの。普通の生活を送ってほしかった。
Didn't want me to awaken, like as a gigolomaniac. Rimi knew more about me than I did.
一体君は何者なの？
私は
Rimi hesitated a little.
私はタクの友達だって思ってる。友達でいたいな。
In other words, she was telling me to stop pushing. But there's no way I could stop there.
僕はギガロマニアックスなの。
そうとも言えるし、違うとも言える。
Which was it? Was she trying to dodge the question?
君は IR2 のこと知ってたの？
聞いたことがあるだけ。
She didn't say from who.
セナが言ってたのは本当なの？
嘘だよ。
Lies. Telling me it was all lies. It was a lie in and of itself. I could tell just from looking at her.
君は
I was about to ask more, but I held my tongue. Are you my enemy, or are you my friend? Depending on the answer, I might not have been able to stay with Rimi. So I didn't ask. If I pretended that nothing had happened, I could keep on deceiving myself just as I had been up until now. That way it might be easier for me. Happier, even. Okay, that was what I was gonna do. I was gonna keep being ignorant and keep living a lie. A lie told by Rimi. Rimi had saved my ass so many times already, so there was no way any harm would come to me if I did that. I deserved to live a normal life, just like she said.
ありがとう。
I averted my eyes from her and swapped out my story for a few words of gratitude.
守ってくれて。
タク、
I couldn't think of anything else to say, so I just continued walking toward my parents' house in silence. My eyes were eventually met with a familiar alleyway. It was a quiet, secluded residential area. Every now and then, I could hear the faint sound of a train in the distance. I'd known this specific chunk of scenery ever since I was a little kid. This was where I'd grown up. I'd walked to both elementary school and middle school using this alleyway. If I headed through the narrow alleyway in front of me, my house would be right there. I was scared of seeing Nanami again, but I had to know for certain whether her arm was still there. I stopped and took a deep breath to calm myself. And then, right when I was about to start walking again,
待って。
I turned around to see Rimi on the verge of tears.
どうしても行くの？ねえ、行かないで。もう普通じゃいられなくなるよ。私そんなの嫌だな。
It all hinges on his family. What was that supposed to do? What was that supposed to?
帰ろう。あのコンテナハウスに帰ろう。私タクが望む限りずっと一緒にいるから。それで一緒に学校に行って大臣と3人で他愛もない話をして、帰りに立ち食いそば屋さんとか CD ショップとかに寄って、そうやってこれからもやっていこうよ。
僕はナナミに会わなくちゃ。
いないよ、きっと。
Why was she so sure? Or was it just another lie? Would something bad happen to me if I went home?
私タクの悲しむ顔見たくない。
So you say.
もう謎かけみたいなことはやめてよ。
I'd had enough. She was telling me to stay ignorant forever. I couldn't go on like this, pretending I knew nothing. Of course I couldn't. Each and every person I knew just kept hitting me with non-stop cryptic nonsense. It never ended. I really did want to stay ignorant. I really did.
実家に行っちゃいけない理由があるなら言ってよ。こんな中途半端なのうんざりなんだ。
Sick of it. Did I have any right to say that? Wasn't I the one who always half-assed everything? Who never said what I really meant? Wasn't I the one who always ran away from everything? Yeah, I was. All the more reason to just keep doing that, from now until forever. It was time to go home. Yumi was right. I didn't need to see Nanami at all. If I was planning on checking whether she had a right hand or not, then what the hell would I do if she didn't? Wouldn't that be all my fault? Nanami would hate me, resent me. All it would have done was solidify that I was a pathetic loser that couldn't even save his own little sister. If I left everything up in the air like it was now, I wouldn't have to be loaded with guilt. So, that was what I'd do. It was the optimal choice. Don't look at anything. No matter how many mysteries come your way, ignore them. Shut yourself away from the world.
ほんと世話が焼けるな。ナナがいないと何にもできないんだから。
ダメだ。
Nanami's tearful voice popped into my head.
ダメだよ。
If I ran away now, I wouldn't be able to face Nanami for the rest of my life. I wouldn't be able to go back home for the rest of my life.
タク。
I clenched my fists and stepped forward into the narrow alleyway that led to my parents' house. I was less than 50 meters away now. At first, I just speed walked. Then I started running toward the home I'd been raised in. 30 meters to go. 20 meters. 10 meters. 0 meters. And when I looked, the house I knew was gone.
あれ
The name on the doorplate was wrong. It wasn't Nishijo. In fact, the entire shape of the house was wrong. It was far newer and nicer than the home I'd lived in. I looked around. I wondered if I'd mistaken one of the neighboring houses for mine. But I hadn't. Actually, none of the surrounding scenery lined up with my memories. I considered that maybe I'd gotten lost or taken the wrong alley. But there was no way that could have happened. I'd recognized the entire route until now. I knew for a fact I remembered the route. But my home wasn't at the end of it. I'd After taking the path back from my memories, the scenery that should have been there hadn't appeared, and a completely unfamiliar one had instead. Jamais vu. It should have been a familiar place. Felt like I was setting foot in it for the first time.
シャメビューだ。
違うよ。
Remy stood right beside me, right behind me. She had denied my words immediately.
この世界にタクの帰る場所はないの。
Whoosh. Whoosh. The sunset illuminated the lone corridor of the hospital. The lights were not turned on in the short period before night fell, rendering it fairly dim. The clamor of dinner time from before had calmed, and an eerie silence descended in its place. Shogun was slowly traveling down the corridor in his wheelchair. The creaking of the wheels echoed throughout the empty hall. Many nurses passed him by, but none spoke to him, nor even so much as glanced his way. Acting as though this was perfectly normal, Shogun continued to spin the wheels with his hands, emaciated skin and bone as they were. When he passed in front of one of the rooms, a male patient known as Yamai called out to him. He pointed at him with his index finger, sounding a frantic cry. Together with Yamai, the nurse had a face of complete befuddlement.
ほら、アミちゃんが帰ってきたよ。またお外に出かけてたんだ。いけないんだ。
誰もいませんよ。
The nurse looked around, then looked at the man with a forced smile on her face. Despite the fact that Shogun was passing through the corridor right before her very eyes, the nurse spoke as if there was no one there at all.
また山井さんは私のことからかってるんでしょう。でも今日は騙されませんからね。
アミちゃん、ラミちゃん。
Isn't the usual protocol to just humor their delusions? Around me. Oh! He's trying to say Takumi. Yamai became increasingly worked up as he continued to cry out. Shogun simply ignored him and silently turned right at the end of the hallway. The wall, which had been cream-colored up until that very moment, suddenly changed to black. And yet, even though that wall stood right in front of him, Shogun did not halt his wheelchair. Right before he was about to collide with it, the black wall suddenly vanished. It quite literally had vanished. After the wall disappeared, a hidden corridor appeared from beyond its past reign. Shogun continued straight through it. He traveled another 20 meters before finally reaching a true dead end. At that dead end was a lone door to a hospital room. Shogun opened the door and headed inside. It was the Phantom Hospital room. The ghost story whispered about for many years. The tale of a room nobody knew of. And the person hospitalized within it, the name written upon the nameplate was Nishijo Takumi. Chapter 9, Gigalomaniac. Well, sucks to leave things off right here, but yeah, I kinda gotta. Yep, I am hook, line, and sinker now. There is no stopping the chaos train. I'm going to see this to its conclusion. But, yeah. I hope you all have a good one.